Okay, what's up, guys? I just want to do a quick video comparing the Xbox Scorpio with the recently announced specs last week to the PS4 Pro. And I feel the need to do this because I'm seeing a lot of information online, a lot of posts in the media and forums of people just saying, wow, the Xbox Scorpio is just so much more powerful than the PS4 Pro, which is, it's somewhat subjective and relative, but by any estimation, that's just not true. It's not so much more powerful. It clearly is more powerful, don't get me wrong, and I'll go into it, and I'm going to explain why. This is coming from someone who is in the game industry, understands game development, has an engineering background. So I have a little bit to say about this, but I'm obviously not working on Scorpio right now. But I know enough about game development to understand how to interpret the specs, is what I'll say. So just getting into it, the first thing to really just take away from the unveiling of the Scorpio specs last week was, more than anything, is that ultimately the Scorpio is in fact just an evolution of the Xbox One, which in turn means that it's an evolution of all of these existing consoles on the market now. Xbox One, PS4, and PS4 Pro. They all basically use the same core architecture. They're using all Jaguar-based CPUs, and they can tell you all about customization. Sony said the same thing, by the way, that there were custom effects in the CPU and PS4 Pro and whatever. And I'm not saying there aren't. They both, so PlayStation platforms and Xbox platforms are obviously different. They're using different, operating systems internally. They're using slightly different, different customization on the GPU side, different drivers, stuff like that. So there are some low-level customization, I'm sure, going on both sides. But generally speaking, from a general hardware standpoint, they are CPU, Jaguar-derived CPUs. The Pro and the Scorpio are just overclocked versions of them. And the GPUs are still AMD, GNC, Radeon cores. Okay? You have 12 CUs, compute units, on the Xbox One. You have 18 on the PS4. You have 36 with the PS4 Pro, and you got 40 with the Scorpio. But there was a lot of rumors and talk about Scorpio having a new architecture, right, or some kind of dramatic difference in hardware, right, which Ryzen CPU cores, for example, would be, because architecturally they are different than Jaguar. And which is why they didn't use them, by the way, because they wanted to maintain as close to 100% compatibility, backwards compatibility with the base systems on PS4 and Xbox One as possible. So for the Pro and Scorpio, they kind of had the hand side. They really couldn't go with some radical different CPU, especially because you might get into compatibility issues. And then for the GPU, same thing. There was talk about Vega, and being some modified version of Vega for the Scorpio, just given the 6 teraflop spec. And really, it is basically a Polaris GPU, just like the PS4 Pro, just like your PC-based RX 480s, but just compared to PS4 Pro, overclocked by a significant amount. And that's really how they're getting the horsepower. Yeah, it has 4 extra compute units as well, but that's not a dramatic difference by any means. So all 4 consoles are basically in the same. You can compare them apples to apples. They're basically using the same parts from the same vendor, and each side has their own take, but that's what it is. And we're literally just stepping up the ladder. Xbox One, PS4, PS4 Pro, Xbox Scorpio. So what is the real difference that we can expect to meaningfully see in games between the Scorpio and the PS4 Pro? Well, I'll tell you that it's not a mystery. All right, if you've seen the specs, it's just really not a mystery. It's really not going to be that hard to figure out. In short, the difference between the Scorpio and the PS4 Pro is going to be pretty much the same as what we see currently with the PS4 and the Xbox One. The PS4 on paper is roughly 40-something odd percent, just faster in terms of raw overall system throughput. What that really amounts to, does it amount to a night and day difference in any games? Absolutely not. It amounts to, on most multi-platform games, slightly higher resolution on the CPU, on the PS4, and more stable frame rates. Right, so the game may drop less frames less often on the PS4. The minimum frame rate may be higher on the PS4. So you might drop a 30 FPS game might drop to 26 minimum PS4, and it might drop to 22 minimum on the Xbox One, for example. The game is running at 1080p native on the PS4, and then running at 900p native on the Xbox One. Stuff like that. But the general settings, to go into PC talk. The settings, the texture detail, the lighting, the shadow quality, those kind of things are generally the same on Xbox One and PS4. They're usually, in the order of equivalent medium settings on the PC. And yeah, you can hit those settings at higher resolution and or a slightly more stable frame rate with the 40% extra power you have on the PS4. It's a little bit more than 40, but whatever. That's what we see. Night and day difference? Absolutely not. Same general games. The average person will never even know the difference if you didn't have them side by side and point it out to them. Let's be honest. I have a PS4. I love it because of the games. But my friends have Xbox Ones. I've seen it many times. If you didn't know better, you're not sitting there like mine. This is not the Genesis and Super Nintendo back in the day. In Mortal Kombat, for example, which look completely different. Colors different, sound completely different, effects were completely different. That's where the hardware was fundamentally different, and that's the key point here. There is nothing that the Scorpio can do from a feature standpoint and a hardware capability standpoint. There's nothing that it provides to game developers as a tool set that the Pro can't provide. And in actuality, in most cases, that the PS4 and Xbox One can't provide. The only difference is it can do the same things, but just do them faster. Right? Which is different than how it used to be back in the day when we had radically different architectures, right? Super Nintendo and Genesis, completely different architectures. PlayStation and Saturn, completely different architectures. There were things that you can do with a PlayStation that literally you can code, and there were instructions that you can do. There were completely different pipelines you can make to create your game and assets that you just simply could not do on the Saturn. You could try to emulate it and kind of replicate it in different ways, and which they obviously tried to do. They think to like Tomb Raider, the port between PlayStation and Saturn. You just couldn't do it. The 3D fighting games at the time. Look at Tekken compared to Virtua Fighter on the Saturn. Saturn was made as a 2D processing, monster. That's what it was mostly made for, not for 3D processing. So they tried to extrapolate it. It just didn't look right because you just simply couldn't do the same kind of effects. Same thing with like N64 versus PlayStation. There was just things you can do on the N64 hardware, especially in the realm of 3D, that you just simply could not do on the PlayStation. So you can only try to simulate it. PS2 and Xbox is probably the last time we really saw that big difference. Xbox, the original Xbox, was radically more advanced than the PS2 on a hardware level. You can do native, AA, anti-aliasing. You can do native shading. That was the whole the advent of programmable shaders, stuff like that. You could not do that on a PlayStation. You could only hope to try to model it and simulate it in software, which was really difficult and almost always had subpar results. That's not the case now. Okay, Xbox Scorpio is not giving you something radically new that, from a developer standpoint, that none of these other consoles that are available in the market today can't give you. It just can give you more of it, right? And the same, tools you can, or features you can add, you can do them faster. It'll give you more headroom, so you can have better performance, or just add maybe more features, but do the same thing. So some numbers. The Xbox Scorpio, we know, is again about 40-something%, a little bit more than 40% more powerful than the PlayStation Pro. Well, think about that. What does that give you? Well, a game that was running at, let's say, 4K 30 on the PS4 Pro, 40% is roughly, from 30 FPS, is roughly 12 frames per second, right? So let's give it a little bit more advantage and say, you can have a 30 FPS game running at 4K, on a PS4 Pro, that will probably give you about 45 FPS on a Scorpio. Same game, same settings, everything being equal, you can get about an extra, 12 to 15 frames per second on Scorpio. Okay, right? That's pretty good, right? A game that's running, perfect example, Final Fantasy 15 on the Pro, the unlocked version, it generally averages about 45, literally averages. It kind of hovers between 40 and 50. A game like that on Scorpio, with everything else being the same, all the same settings, same resolution, you can probably get to 60, right? You can probably take that 45-ish FPS on Pro and get to 60 on Scorpio. Absolutely. Could you take a 1080p 30 game on the Pro and run it at 4K 60 on the Scorpio? Absolutely not. Even 4K 30, most likely not, right? Going to 1080p to 4K is 4x. We're not talking 4x over, from Scorpio to PS4 Pro especially, right? We're talking not even 2x. We're talking like less than 50%, right? Can you go from a game that runs at checkerboarding 1800p on the Pro, and then let's say 1800p checkerboarding on the Pro at 60 FPS, and then get that to 4K 60 on the Scorpio? Possibly. Okay, possibly 1800p to 4K, possibly. Could you go from 1800p 30 on the Pro to 4K 60 on the Scorpio? Probably not. There may be some cases with maybe like some smaller indie game, something like that, perhaps, but most likely not. We're not talking about that level difference, guys. Okay. Again, you're talking about 1800p, the same frame rate, running at 4K, same frame rate on Scorpio, something like that, right? 1440p games on the PS4 Pro, like 1440 30 games, you might be able to get to 4K 30 on the Scorpio, probably in most cases. 1440p 60 on Pro, 4K 60 is still a lot of throughput. You might be able to get there, but you probably can get to 4K, something close to 60, or maybe a checkerboard 4K 60 even on Scorpio, something like that, right? Here's another way to think about this performance difference, guys. The Scorpio, as we said, is about somewhere between 40 to 45% more powerful, faster than the Pro, right? Okay. Well, we know that the Pro is about 2.25 times faster than the regular PS4. Okay, let's say over 200% faster than the regular PS4. Okay. The going narrative for the PS4 Pro today is that it really isn't that big of a difference from the PS4, right? The media, the fans, everyone is saying that. I have a PS4 Pro. I'm a technology person. I've been in technology my whole life, my whole career, my whole life. I have a GTX 1080 graphics card, PC. I try to stay at the top end of my when it comes to hardware and stuff like that. I have a 4K TV now with HDR, the OLED, everything, the whole nine. Great. PS4 Pro looks great, but so does the regular PS4. Honestly, the difference that I have seen is really, really not that much, to the point where I can't recommend to someone to get a PS4 Pro. It's simply not worth it. If you don't have a PS4 at all and you're just getting into the PS4 ecosystem, and you are someone that likes graphics and want to have the high-end thing, well, then get that, sure. If you have a PS4 at all, I wouldn't recommend, even with a 4K TV, honestly. I mean, it's not necessary, but if you have a 4K TV, you probably want something, to take advantage of it. So, sure. And that's kind of why, I wanted to get it. I'm like, there's not a whole lot of 4K content out there. It'd be great to have some games at 4K or at least higher than 1080p resolution. And that's why I got it. It's great, sure. But it really just isn't that big of a difference. I'm not going to lie. It's not worth it. Even the games that have enhanced visuals, really, really hard to see it. And I'm someone that have studied graphics. I know graphics. I can, be picky and see the differences. But I'm just saying, it's a hard sell. I can show my friends, I can show my wife, and say, hey, look, this is what's different. And it's really just small, meaningless things that really don't affect the game, is what I'm saying. And they would never notice it if I didn't point it out to them, right? So, in a lot of ways, the PS4 Pro has been underwhelming, honestly, in that regard. But every time there's a game that comes out and and it's 1800p or 4K checkerboarding or native or whatever, there's a little excitement. Again, having a 4K TV to just say, this is something that today at least you're really not going to get anywhere else. I don't have a 4K monitor for my PC. I have like an ultra wide 1440p high resolution monitor, but it's not 4K. So I'm not really going to see a 4K game any other place. So it's still cool, but definitely not worth it, like, to reinvest in it. With that said, again, the PS4 Pro is over 200% or over 2x the PS4, and we barely see the difference. Guys, the Scorpio is 40-something%. It's not even 2x. It's nowhere near 2x. Okay, it's 40% faster, right? If we could barely see the difference with a system that is over 2x in today's world, and law of diminishing returns and all this stuff with graphics and everything, what are you expecting to see with 40% more total throughput? Okay, I'm just saying. I'm not saying that it's not more powerful. Of course it is. It is the most powerful system. It's going to give Microsoft bragging rights, and almost every third-party game is going to look best on Scorpio. At the very least, it will probably look on par on the PS4 Pro, as there are some games now on the Xbox One that looks on par with the PS4, right? The sports games, for example, Madden, NBA 2K, FIFA, all run at 1080p 60 on both platforms, right? Obviously, there's extra headroom on the PS4 in those engines, but the games still look great. They're 60 FPS, they run smooth, and right, everyone's happy. There'll be some cases like that, where you'll have the same specs on paper, the same settings, and there'll be some room left on the table on the Scorpio side, and life moves on, and both games will still look and play great on both platforms. But by and large, if a developer takes some time to take advantage of the extra headroom on Scorpio, yeah, you're gonna see a little bit extra resolution. You're gonna see a slightly more stable frame rate. You're not gonna see a 30 FPS Pro game run at 60 on a Scorpio. I'm not going to say that won't ever be a single case. Again, there might be some small indie case, but by and large, you're not going to see that. I guarantee you're not going to see that. You're going to see the same frame rates because, if nothing else, the CPUs are basically the same. Scorpio just has a 10% frequency advantage. Okay? That's definitely not going to give you twice the frame rate. For graphically bound games, yeah, you can push up the effects more and you can push the resolution more. That's what you're going to get. But overall frame rates are going to be the same, right? I'll tell you that right now. So just pump the brakes a little bit. All of this super powerful. It is really powerful. It's the most powerful console. We get all that. Again, I expect the games to look great. The biggest difference with Scorpio that has me most excited is the memory advantage, because now you can actually have super high resolution textures and super high resolution assets in the game, and that's going to make probably more of a difference than just pure pixels, right? That's probably one of the biggest problems with the PS4 Pro, is that all we're doing is taking PS4 games and just scaling up the resolution. And even if you run it native, I mean, you're just literally expanding the size of the frame buffer. You're adding more pixels. But everything is the same as they are on the PS4 Pro. The regular PS4, right? The textures are the same, the models are the same, the resolution of, like, the effects are the same, the texture resolution is the same, all that kind of stuff. So it looks the same, just a little bit sharper, right? Because you have more pixels. But Scorpio, with the extra memory, 12 gigs and 8 gigs usable, and the extra memory bandwidth, now we can actually see like full, 4K resolution textures and full 4K resolution assets running at 4K resolution. That's the real, kind of holy grail with 4K. Even on the PC side, we don't see that a lot. There's a handful of games that have released, a 4K texture pack, which is a lot of memory, a lot of VRAM usage, stuff like that. But it's not universal. It's not the majority, but there's some out there. But most aren't, right? So that's cool. That's powerful. We're not going to see it a lot on the Scorpio, guarantee. I'm sure Microsoft first-party studios will probably use it. But a lot of the multi-platform stuff, we're not going to see that. But it's cool there, and we'll see some games there, and that's going to make a difference. That's going to make games look better and much more detailed than what you see on the Pro, even if they ran at the same resolution, in terms of like raw, pixel count, not texture resolution. So, yeah, we'll see. But let's pump the brakes. It's not a world. It's not a night and day difference, and that's basically what the specs show. It's like, this is not Vega. This is not Ryzen. This isn't some new architecture to get around. This is a just further step up the evolutionary ladder of AMD's GNC cores and Jaguar CPU architecture that the other 3 consoles on the market are already using. Same capabilities basically as all the other 3 consoles, especially the PS4 Pro, just a little bit faster, and you have more headroom. Basically, that's what it amounts to. Games are going to look great. Games are, side by side going to look slightly sharper. They're going to look best on Scorpio, no question. I'm not refuting that. But they'll look great on both platforms, I believe. Ultimately, especially Sony first-party stuff. Software is still what matters. There's been a lot of talk about that. I can go on about that, but yeah, Microsoft really has to just get games that matter. All right, you can have it at 8K, 32K, and who the hell cares, right? I mean, you need games that people want to play, and that's going to matter. And Sony's really killing it right now with their software and their third-party partnerships, right? Because at the end of the day, these consoles are still, like the Scorpio and the Pro, are still just refreshes of Xbox One and PS4. There's still refreshes of those existing consoles, which means that there are no exclusive games. No games are built from the ground up using those extra specs. All we're seeing is current Xbox One, PS4 generation games scaled up with the extra hardware. The same way we see the game run on a low-end PC in low settings or medium settings, and then run at high ultra settings on a beefier PC. That's really what we're seeing here. But the core games are still the same. Right, so this isn't a new console, generation by any means. This isn't going to be a night and day type of thing. Coming from Xbox One, if you like technology, you love resolution, you got a new 4K TV, yes, it's going to be a blast, and it'll be a nice jump coming from Xbox One, especially. Someone with a Pro, I mean, again, between the software that Sony has and the marginal difference you might see, it's just not worth it, So don't let the media fool you. It's really not a huge difference. Let's just say that. It's not. It is a difference, but not huge. The games look great, though. Looking forward to it. Microsoft really getting back in the game. They definitely seem more focused and dedicated, which is good for everyone in the industry. So, go Microsoft. I'm looking forward to E3 to see kind of how games are really looking, right? And I think there will be clear. The first party games they're gonna flaunt them. Almost all the first party games are gonna be native 4K. Some of them are gonna be pushing 60, like Rare Sea of Thieves game. Forza obviously will be 60. Crackdown is probably not gonna be 60, but who knows? But they'll push it. They're gonna push it. First party. Third party games, you're gonna see a lot. You're gonna see some native 4K. You're gonna see some 1800Ps. You might see some checkerboard 4Ks. And you're gonna see the same frame rates that you'll find on the Pro, basically. And I think everything will kind of things will settle down. People come back to the ground. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, it is just kind of Xbox One refresh. Isn't a bad thing, but again, it's not. Here's setting the world on fire. We're getting whole new, super high end console experiences. No, let's not expect that. Anyway, guys, done with this rant. Again, looking forward to E3. We'll see what happens. Talk to you later.